He returned home expecting silence, but instead, the widowed millionaire heard laughter echoing through his empty halls. His daughter, broken by her mother's death, was smiling again, because of the maid he barely knew. But was this a miracle of healing, or the beginning of a truth that would shatter everything he thought he controlled? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. And the winter night hung heavy over the quiet roads leading up to the Blackwood estate. A fresh layer of frost clung to the hedges lining the long driveway, and the iron gates loomed like sentinels against the glow of Adrian Blackwood's car headlights. He hadn't planned to be here, not tonight, not until his scheduled return in 3 days. But something inside him, a restless emptiness gnawing at his chest, had pushed him to cancel the last round of meetings and drive through the night toward home. Home. The word felt hollow these days. Since his wife, Emily, had passed away 2 years earlier, the Blackwood mansion had been little more than a monument to absence. Every chandelier, every polished marble step, every echoing corridor whispered of what had been lost. Adrian had thrown himself into his business empire meeting's endless perp work, anything to fill the void, anything to avoid the silence that greeted him whenever he came back. Tonight, as the driver pulled the sleek black sedan up the long driveway, Adrian loosened his tie and rubbed his temple. The house stood in the distance, tall and cold against the dark sky, its windows glowing faintly with the golden flicker of lamplight. He braced himself for the quiet that would inevitably meet him once he crossed the threshold. "Shall I have the staff prepare something, sir?" his driver asked quietly. Adrian replied, his voice clipped, tired. "That won't be necessary. I'll manage." The car stopped. Adrian gathered his coat and briefcase, stepping out into the cold night air. His polished shoes clicked against the stone path as he approached the front doors, the sound hollow and lonely. He pushed the doors open, expecting to be swallowed by stillness, but instead, he froze. Faint laughter floated down the hallway. Not the shallow, polite kind of laughter he occasionally forced at business dinners, but real laughter. It carried with it warmth, the kind of warmth he had not heard inside these walls since Emily's death. For a second, Adrian wondered if exhaustion had finally tipped him into hallucination. But then it came again, lighter, brighter, unmistakably real. And it wasn't just laughter, it was music. The soft strains of a piano drifted from the east wing of the house, from the very room where Emily used to play. A gentle melody stumbled at times, playful and imperfect, but filled with life. Adrian's chest constricted. His footsteps moved of their own accord, drawn like a magnet to the sound. He stopped at the open doorway to the music room. The sight inside nearly brought him to his knees. There, sitting at the grand piano, was his daughter, Lily. His little girl, just 8 years old, her hair falling in loose dark curls around her face, her small hands pressing hesitantly at the keys. She was laughing, actually laughing, and her clear voice, so long silent, escaped in giggles as she glanced toward the young woman seated beside her on the bench. Sofia Rivera, the new maid. Adrian's throat tightened, his vision blurring as he tried to process what he was seeing. For nearly 2 years, since Emily's accident, Lily had withdrawn into a shell. She had stopped speaking, stopped smiling, stopped singing the bedtime songs she once shared with her mother. Countless therapists had tried and failed to reach her. Adrian had resigned himself to the possibility that his daughter might never recover from the loss, that her childhood had been permanently fractured. But now, here she was. Her fingers stumbled over the keys, and she clutched at Sofia's arm, laughing again, as though the world had not broken her heart in two. Adrian's chest heaved. He leaned against the doorframe, overcome. He had returned early, expecting nothing but silence, but instead, he was met with the one sound he had yearned for most, his daughter's laughter. For the first time in years, tears stung his eyes. Sofia hadn't noticed him yet. She leaned closer to Lily, whispering encouragement. "That's it, sweetheart. See? You remember where middle C is. You're braver than you think." Lily giggled again, the melody slipping into a playful jumble of notes. Her small voice chimed softly, tentative but real. "I did it." Adrian's breath caught. Words. She had spoken actual words. He pressed a hand to his mouth, stifling a sound, his heart pounding so fiercely it almost hurt. For 2 years, he had given his daughter everything money could buy: specialists, tutors, luxury distractions, but none of it had pierced the darkness she carried. And yet this young woman, this maid who had been in his house for only a few weeks, had managed to draw out laughter, music, and even words. Adrian could no longer stand in silence. He stepped forward, his shoes brushing the edge of the rug. Sofia turned at once, startled, her dark eyes widening as she met his gaze. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, rising from the piano bench in surprise. "You weren't expected until Friday." Lily turned too. For a brief moment, she froze, her small body tense, as if caught in something forbidden. Then her eyes softened, and she smiled, the faint, shy smile of a child rediscovering joy. Adrian nearly broke. "Came back early," he managed, his voice hoarse. His eyes flicked to Lily, then back to Sofia. "I didn't expect this." Silence lingered, filled only by the fading resonance of the piano. Adrian stood there, a man who had conquered boardrooms, controlled empires, and silenced rivals with a glance, utterly undone by the simple sight of his daughter smiling at a piano. And though he did not yet understand how or why, one truth seared into his heart that night. Everything was about to change. The air in the music room felt different now, charged with an energy Adrian hadn't felt in years. He tried to gather himself, to mask the tremor in his hands, but his gaze kept drifting back to Lily's face. That smile, fragile, hesitant, but so inklingly beautiful, was a miracle he had thought he would never witness again. Lily slid off the piano bench and came to him, her small steps cautious. She clutched the hem of his coat with tiny fingers and looked up at him with eyes so much like Emily's that it broke him all over again. "Ready?" she whispered. The single word shattered what remained of his composure. He knelt instantly, dropping his briefcase carelessly to the floor, and pulled her into his arms. His throat burned as he held her, feeling the tremble of her breath against his chest. He kissed the top of her head, unable to stop his tears. "You spoke," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "You spoke to me." Lily nodded, her little hands clutching his lapel. Over her shoulder, Sofia stood still, uncertain, as though she had intruded on something sacred. Her gaze softened when she saw Adrian trembling, but she didn't move. She simply waited, quiet and steady, the way someone who had learned patience through hardship always did. After a long moment, Adrian finally let Lily go, brushing her curls back gently. He looked at Sofia, still struggling to find his voice. "What did you do?" he asked, not in accusation but in wonder. Sofia shook her head, her tone humble. "Nothing magical, Mr. Blackwood. I just listened to her. I gave her time. She said music in her heart. I only helped her let it out." Adrian studied her, searching for hidden motives. His life had taught him to be suspicious. People often wanted something from him, whether it was money, influence, or power. Yet as he looked at Sofia, he saw none of that hunger. Instead, he saw sincerity, a quiet strength, and a kindness that felt unfamiliar in these marble halls. "A piano," he pressed. "Told me her mother used to play," Sofia said softly. Her eyes flicked toward Lily, who had returned to the bench and was pressing random notes with childish delight. "I thought maybe, if we played together, she'd remember joy instead of pain." Adrian swallowed hard. His late wife's presence lingered in every corner of this room. To know that Sofia had brought Emily's memory back, not as a wound but as a bridge, it overwhelmed him. He sat heavily in one of the armchairs, his composure unraveling. For so long, he had believed his wealth could solve anything, until his wife's death taught him otherwise. Since then, he had tried to buy his daughter's healing, failing at every turn. And now, this woman, with no degrees or titles, had accomplished in weeks what money could not. Sofia remained quiet, her hands folded, as though she didn't wish to intrude further. Adrian finally spoke, his voice quiet but edged with resolve. "Stay." Sofia tilted her head. "Sir?" "Don't leave this house," Adrian said firmly. "Whatever you've done, whatever you're doing, it's working. And I can't lose this, not again." For the first time since he had walked into the room, Sofia's composure faltered. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but beneath it, something else stirred. Something like compassion. She nodded slowly. "I'll stay, Mr. Blackwood." For her. Adrian's gaze softened. He glanced at Lily, who was humming softly now, her small voice carrying through the grand room. For the first time in years, the mansion did not feel like a mausoleum. It felt alive. As he sat there, tears drying on his face, Adrian Blackwood realized something he had not dared to hope for. This was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of something new. And though he did not yet understand the path ahead, one truth was undeniable. The woman standing quietly by the piano had just changed the course of his life. The night had grown heavier after Adrian's unexpected return, but the music that had filled the mansion lingered in the air long after the piano's last note faded. Adrian remained seated in the music room, his chest still raw from the tears he had shed, his mind racing. He could not let this moment pass without answers. Sofia Rivera stood quietly near the piano, her hands folded in front of her, the glow of the lamplight catching in her dark hair. She looked as though she were bracing for reprimand, her eyes steady yet uncertain. Adrian rose from his chair, his tall frame casting long shadows across the carpet, and fixed his gaze on her. "How'd you do it?" His voice was low but sharp, like a man on the verge of unraveling. Sofia blinked. "Do what, Mr. Blackwood?" Out of excitement. For 2 years, doctors trembled with more desperation than anger. He gestured toward the piano, where Lily still sat, humming softly as her small fingers wandered over the keys. For 2 years, doctors, tutors, therapists, every expert I could find, none of them reached her. None of them. And yet, you... His voice broke. Sofia did not flinch at his tone. Instead, she lowered her gaze, her voice quiet but steady. "I didn't heal her, Mr. Blackwood. Lily already had the music inside her. I just reminded her it was still there." Adrian's jaw tightened. He felt the weight of his frustration pressing on him, the need for an explanation that could make sense of what felt impossible. "You expect me to believe it's that simple? That after everything, it just took a song?" Sofia's eyes lifted to his, calm and unshaken. "Not a song. Trust." The word hung in the air like a bell toll. Adrian faltered, caught off guard. Sofia took a small step closer, her voice softening but growing firmer with each word. "When I first met her," she said, glancing toward Lily, "she wouldn't look at me. She barely moved, as though she was holding her breath all the time. I recognized that look because I wore it too once. When my mother died, the world went quiet for me. I stopped speaking for almost a year. People thought I was broken, but really, I was afraid. Afraid no one could hear me, even if I screamed." Her words struck deeper than Adrian wanted to admit. He studied her carefully, suspicion fighting with something more dangerous. Recognition. "What changed for you?" he asked, his tone softer now, though still guarded. Sofia's eyes glistened briefly before she blinked it away. "Music. My mother used to sing to me. After she was gone, I started sitting by an old piano in the church near our neighborhood. I didn't know how to play, not really, but pressing the keys felt like breathing again. Little by little, I found a way back." Adrian glanced at Lily, who now leaned contentedly against the piano bench, her doll resting on her lap. He swallowed hard. "So you thought music would do the same for her?" "Hoped," Sofia admitted. "And when she let me sit beside her at the piano, without pushing me away, I knew she wanted someone to listen. Not a doctor with charts, not a tutor with assignments, just someone who would be patient with her silence." Her words left him raw. For 2 years he had tried to buy every possible solution, throwing his fortune into finding answers, yet he had overlooked something so simple. Still, suspicion gnawed at him. He straightened his shoulders, his tone sharpening again. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sofia's brow furrowed. "Tell you what?" But she was speaking. That she was laughing. "You should have come to me the moment she opened her mouth." Sofia's composure hardened at his accusation. "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, Lily didn't laugh tonight because she was being observed. She laughed because she was safe. If I had paraded her progress to you like some prize, she would have retreated again. Children aren't projects to be reported. They're hearts that need protect." The firmness in her voice disarmed him more than he wanted to admit. He had expected an apology, not defiance. His chest burned with something uncomfortably close to shame. Before he could reply, Lily slid off the piano bench and padded toward Sofia, clutching her doll. Without hesitation, she nestled herself against Sofia's side, her little arms wrapping around the maid's waist. Sofia instinctively bent, resting a gentle hand on the girl's hair. Adrian froze. His daughter, his precious Lily, who had flinched at touch for so long, was clinging not to him, but to her. A storm of emotions tore through him: jealousy, awe, grief, and something he couldn't quite name. He wanted to be angry, to remind Sofia that she was staff, nothing more. But the sight of Lily's small face pressed against Sofia's dress, the ease with which she breathed beside her, stole the anger from his lips. "Is sugar to cling to me," Adrian whispered under his breath, though he wasn't sure if it was accusation or confession. Sofia glanced at him, her dark eyes unreadable, but her hand never left Lily's hair. "She will," she said softly. "When she's ready." The words stung, but deep down, Adrian knew they were true. He had spent years drowning himself in grief and work, keeping Lily at a distance, even as he tried to provide everything she could ever want. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing him as a safe place. And now, this woman, this maid, had managed to offer what he hadn't. Adrian turned away, walking to the window, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. The man who gazed back was not the one he used to know. He was older, warier, his sharp edges blunted by guilt he refused to name. Behind him, Lily yawned softly, her head still pressed against Sofia. The sight pierced him deeper than any business loss ever could. That night, Adrian made a silent vow. He would not dismiss Sofia. He would not ignore her. He would watch her closely, not only because suspicion told him to, but because something inside him, something raw and aching, needed to understand how she had done what he could not. And perhaps, though he would never admit it aloud, because a part of him feared she might just be the only person keeping his daughter's fragile world intact. The following morning, the Blackwood mansion stirred earlier than usual. Adrian had slept little, pacing his study until dawn, replaying the scene over and over. Lily laughing, Lily speaking, Lily clinging to Sofia as if she were an anchor. When he descended to breakfast, he found them in the sunlit kitchen. Not the dining hall with its endless table where he usually sat in sterile silence, but the cozy staff kitchen tucked near the back. Lily sat at the counter, swinging her legs as Sofia prepared pancakes, humming a tune under her breath. The aroma of butter and maple syrup filled the air, a smell Adrian hadn't noticed in years. He stood at the doorway, invisible for a moment, as Lily giggled softly when Sofia dusted flour across her nose. The child who had once moved like a ghost through these halls now looked almost like any other little girl. Adrian cleared his throat. Both pairs of eyes turned toward him. Lily's smile faltered, retreating back into shyness, but Sofia gave him a polite nod. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she said evenly. He walked in slowly, taking the seat across from Lily. "Morning." His eyes lingered on his daughter. "How are you feeling?" Lily hesitated, clutching her fork, then looked to Sofia. Sofia crouched beside her, murmuring encouragement. After a pause, Lily whispered, "Better." The single word, barely audible, felt like thunder to Adrian. His heart ached, but, before he could respond, Lily turned back to her plate, cheeks pink with effort. Adrian studied Sofia carefully. "She never speaks to me like that," he admitted, his tone rough. Sofia met his gaze steadily. "Give her time. She's learning to trust again. She needs to know you'll stay when she reaches for you." Her words cut deeper than she likely intended. He wanted to protest, to defend himself, but something inside told him she was right. He had been present in body, but absent in spirit, burying himself in his empire while his daughter lived in silence. As breakfast went on, Adrian found himself watching them both. Sofia wasn't coddling Lily the way many tutors had. She guided gently, but also allowed space for Lily to try and fail without fear. Every small giggle, every whispered word was treated like a victory. Later, as Sofia led Lily toward the garden, Adrian called after her. "Miss Rivera?" She turned, waiting. He hesitated before speaking, his voice low. "I'll be watching you. Closely." Her brows rose slightly, but she didn't flinch. "I expect nothing less, sir." Something flickered in her eyes then, something that wasn't fear or resentment but quiet strength, and for the first time, Adrian realized this maid might not be someone he could easily dismiss or control. As he stood there, watching Sofia take Lily's hand and lead her into the winter sunlight, Adrian felt both unsettled and strangely alive. Suspicion still gnawed at him, but so did curiosity. And beneath it all, a whisper he dared not name: awe. The Blackwood mansion was known for its order, its polished marble floors that gleamed without a streak, its crystal chandeliers that threw a cold light into rooms too big for warmth. Adrian had always believed order meant stability, that if every glass stood in its place and every servant followed the rules he'd established, he could control the chaos life had once hurled at him. But with Sofia's arrival, the mansion began to change in ways Adrian couldn't have predicted. It started with Lily's laughter. Where once silence had echoed through the long hallways, now soft giggles trailed after Sofia and Lily as they painted in the sunroom. Instead of carefully preserved white table linens, blotches of red and blue paints appeared on aprons draped over chairs. The staff whispered about the disruption. To them, a maid's job was to dust quietly, to serve meals without a sound, not to sing lullabies or sit cross-legged on the floor building castles out of blocks with the master's daughter. Adrian observed this quietly at first. He stood in doorways, arms folded, jaw tight, trying to decipher if what he saw was harmless or dangerous. Lily's smile tugged at something deep within him, yet his instincts told him not to let feelings blur lines. Feelings made men weak. He had learned that lesson long ago when grief nearly drowned him. Still, he couldn't ignore the transformation. His daughter, once a fragile shadow of herself, now sang nursery songs with Sofia as if her voice had never been locked away. She danced clumsily in socks along the polished floor, and when Sofia applauded her drawings, Lily beamed with pride. One evening, Adrian invited his relatives for dinner. It had been months since they had gathered, but appearances were important, especially with rumors circulating about his state after his wife's passing. The dining room glowed with candlelight, gold cutlery gleaming under the chandelier. Every detail spoke of wealth and discipline. Yet in the corner, a quiet disruption occurred. Layla, perched happily at the table beside Adrian, leaned toward Sofia, who stood discreetly by to assist. The girl whispered something, then said aloud, with a proud little smile, "Sofia is family." The air froze. Forks paused mid-air, conversations cut short. Adrian's cousin Margaret, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, arched an eyebrow. "Family, my dear? Isn't that a little bold?" Her voice carried the kind of politeness that sliced deeper than cruelty. A ripple of whispers swept down the table. Family, the word rolled through Adrian's chest like thunder. Family was sacred, exclusive, bound by blood and legacy. Not for a maid, not for someone who had stepped, uninvited, into the fragile bond between him and his daughter. Adrian said, his tone sharper than intended. "Sofia works here. She is not family." The light in Lily's eyes dimmed instantly. She dropped her gaze, her little fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. Sofia's face flushed, but she said nothing, only bowed her head slightly and stepped back. Dinner continued, but Adrian felt none of it. The lamb roasted to perfection. The clink of crystal glasses, the meaningless chatter about business ventures. He only saw Lily's silence, her appetite gone, her shoulders curling inward as though ashamed. Sofia did not look at him again that night, not when clearing plates, not when Lily later clung to her hand in the hallway before bed. When Adrian retired to his study, he tried to convince himself he had done the right thing. A child needed boundaries, clarity, the understanding of roles. If Lily blurred those lines, she would grow up confused about trust and loyalty. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, staring into the amber liquid as though it might hold the answers. But later, as he walked the quiet halls, he heard something that stopped him cold outside Lily's room. The girl's small voice, trembling yet desperate, whispered into the night, Don't leave me too, Sofia." The words cut deeper than a blade. Adrian stood frozen, his breath shallow as he listened. Sofia's voice, soft and steady, answered, "I'm not going anywhere, little one. Sleep now." It should have brought him relief, but instead it shattered him. His daughter feared abandonment so deeply she clung to a maid, not to him. And worse, she feared he would drive Sofia away, just as the universe had taken her mother. Adrian pressed his hand against the doorframe, chest heavy with the weight of his own failures. He had wealth beyond imagination, yet he couldn't give his daughter the simplest thing she begged for, a sense of safety. The next morning, Adrian carried himself with the same rigid posture as always, his suit crisp, his hair immaculate. But inside, the echo of Lily's plea would not let him rest. "Don't leave me too." The words haunted his every thought, playing on repeat during meetings, echoing as he signed contracts, burning behind his eyes even as he tried to focus on work. At breakfast, Lily sat at the table quietly, stirring her cereal but not eating. Her gaze flicked often to Sofia, who hummed softly while pouring juice. It was clear to Adrian his daughter's world was shifting, orbiting not around him, but around Sofia. "Peeve, Lily," he urged, his voice firmer than intended. She flinched. It was Sofia, not Adrian, who crouched gently beside Lily and coaxed her with patience. "Just 3 spoonfuls, little star. One for you, one for mommy in heaven, and one for me." Lily's lips curved faintly before she obeyed, spooning cereal into her mouth. And Adrian's throat tightened. He wanted to be the one to break through her walls, yet every attempt ended with her recoiling. Sofia, without effort, managed to reach places he could not. Later, as Adrian prepared to leave for the office, his cousin Margaret intercepted him near the foyer. Her voice was low, but venomous. "You're letting a servant become too familiar. People are talking. If you don't control it, you'll look weak, Adrian." He clenched his jaw. "She's here for Lily, that's all." "Family isn't healed by maids," Margaret said. "It's healed by blood and legacy." The words echoed the old rules he had lived by all his life. Legacy, wealth, appearances. Yet last night he had seen none of that matter. What mattered was Lily's whispered fear, the crack in her tiny voice. That evening, Adrian returned earlier than usual. He walked past the library and paused at the sound of music. Sofia sat at the piano, Lily at her side, their voices soft as they sang a lullaby. Lily leaned against Sofia's shoulder, her small body relaxed, her smile unguarded. Adrian's chest ached. He wanted to step inside to join them, but his feet remained heavy. He was afraid of being the intruder in his own home, afraid that Lily no longer needed him. At dinner, the air was strained. Adrian tried to assert his presence, asking Lily about her day, but the girl answered with single words, glancing toward Sofia as if seeking permission to speak. Adrian's frustration grew. Finally, when Lily giggled at something Sofia whispered and called her family again, Adrian slammed his hand against the table. "Enough," his voice boomed through the dining room, startling them both. "Sofia is not family. She is here to work and nothing more." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She shrank back, her appetite gone. Sofia's lips pressed into a thin line, pain flashing in her eyes, but she nodded silently and excused herself. The silence afterward was unbearable. Adrian stared at his plate, but food tasted like ash. He had done it again, pushed his daughter deeper into a shell. Hours later, when the mansion lay quiet, Adrian passed Lily's room and heard it once more. The small, broken whisper, "Don't leave me too, Sofia." Adrian leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, tears escaped freely down his face. He realized he had become the very man he swore he'd never be. A father who instilled fear rather than comfort, who built walls instead of bridges. The mansion, once a fortress of control, now felt like a prison of his own making. And as Sofia's soft voice soothed Lily to sleep, Adrian knew the truth. If he continued on this path, he wouldn't just lose Sofia, he would lose Lily too, forever. The Blackwood mansion had grown quieter in the days after the dinner incident. Though life inside continued, meals served, halls polished, gardens tended, there was an undercurrent of tension that weighed on every corner. Lily still clung to Sofia, still sought her warmth, but the child's laughter was softer now, more hesitant, as though she feared it might anger her father. Adrian carried the silence like a cloak. In the boardroom, he gave commands with his usual steel precision, yet his mind drifted back to Lily's whisper, to her wide eyes when he had raised his voice. At night, he wandered through the empty master bedroom, the scent of his late wife's perfume faint on the edges of memory. It had been years, but the grief remained, buried deep under layers of work and wealth. He had never spoken of it to anyone, not even to Lily, especially not to Lily. One evening, Adrian stood in the library, staring at a framed photo on the mantel. His wife, Isabella, smiling in the sunlight, cradling Lily as a baby. The image stabbed through him. He remembered that day, her laugh as she teased him for snapping too many photos, her promise that their daughter would grow up in a home full of joy, and then, just months later, the car accident that shattered everything. He had been away on business that night. He hadn't answered her last call. That knowledge haunted him. While others told him it wasn't his fault, Adrian bore the guilt in silence. Instead of grieving with Lily, he had drowned himself in meetings, mergers, and endless schedules, convincing himself that building an empire was the only way to protect her. The sound of footsteps drew him back. Sofia entered quietly, holding a stack of books she had borrowed for Lily. She froze when she saw him at the mantel, his gaze locked on the photo. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, as though afraid to intrude. Adrian's voice was rough. "Do you know what it's like to build your life around someone, only to lose them in the blink of an eye?" And Sofia set the books down gently, her expression solemn. "Yes," she whispered. "My mother died when I was young. Music was the only thing that made me feel like she hadn't vanished completely." Adrian turned sharply, his grief warping into defensiveness. "And now you think you can use music to replace Isabella for Lily?" The accusation startled even him, but once spoken, it burned in the air. Sofia's eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face, but she did not flinch. She stepped closer, her voice steady though low. "I am not replacing her. I could never replace her. I am only trying to help her daughter live again." The words hit Adrian like a blow. He opened his mouth, then closed it, struggling with the storm rising inside. He wanted to argue, to protect the fragile walls he had built around his grief. But Sofia's quiet conviction pierced through those defenses. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not empty, but heavy, filled with unshed tears and truths neither dared to fully confront. Adrian finally turned away, unable to face the rawness in her eyes. Yet, even as he walked from the room, Sofia's words followed him like a shadow. Helping her daughter live again. Could it be that in clinging so hard to control, he had suffocated the very life his wife would have wanted for Lily? The confrontation in the library lingered in Adrian's mind for days. He found himself replaying the exchange in his head, the accusation he had hurled at Sofia, her calm refusal to accept it. He had expected defensiveness, perhaps even anger. Instead, she had spoken with a strength that disarmed him, a strength born not of defiance. At night, sleep evaded him. He dreamed instead of Isabella's laughter, of Lily's first steps, of the hospital corridor where he had stood, paralyzed, as a doctor delivered the news of his wife's death. He woke, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, the emptiness beside him in bed sharper than ever. The next morning, he watched Lily from a distance as she played with Sofia in the garden. The child's cheeks were flushed, her giggles rising like music. Sofia guided her through a simple song, clapping her hands in rhythm. Adrian's chest ached. This was what Isabella had wanted: joy, music, warmth. Yet it was Sofia who brought it, not him. Later, unable to contain the turmoil, Adrian found himself confronting Sofia again. This time in the kitchen, where she was tidying up after baking with Lily. "You're making her dependent," he said, his tone colder than he intended. "What happens when you leave? When she clings to you and you're gone? What then?" Sofia looked up, wiping flour from her hands. Her gaze met his squarely. "And what happens if no one is here for her at all? If she learns that everyone she loves leaves?" Her words cut him again, sharper than any blade. Adrian's throat tightened, but he forced himself to speak. I've given her everything. This house, the best doctors, tutors. Everything but you, Sofia interrupted softly. The words hung between them like thunder. Adrian stiffened, pride urging him to shut the conversation down, but deep inside, a crack widened. She was right. He had given Lily everything money could buy, yet withheld the one thing she needed most. Presence, love, the assurance she wasn't alone. "Do you know what it's like?" Adrian said, his voice breaking despite himself, "to hold your child and realize you don't know how to comfort her, to see her tears and feel like a stranger in your own home." Sofia's eyes softened. "I know what it's like to be that child," she said gently, "to need comfort and not find it. That's why I won't let Lily feel that way, if I can help it." Adrian turned away, blinking back the tears that threatened to fall. He had never spoken these truths aloud, never admitted his failures even to himself. Yet here was this woman, a maid with no wealth or power, holding up a mirror he could not look away from. That night, he lingered outside Lily's door again. Inside, he heard Sofia's voice carrying a lullaby, Lily's soft laughter blending with the tune. Adrian pressed his hand to the wall, torn between shame and gratitude. Sofia was right. She wasn't replacing Isabella, she was helping their daughter live again. And Adrian, for all his wealth, didn't know if he had the courage to do the same. The morning broke with the sound of footsteps in the hallways and whispers carried through the vast house. It wasn't the gentle rhythm of routine, but the hurried shuffle of staff trading hushed rumors. When Adrian stepped into his study, the truth was waiting on his desk in the form of a thick stack of newspapers. The headlines screamed with cruel certainty: "Millionaire father and the maid scandal." In the Blackwood estate, one paper had splashed across its front page a grainy photo of Sofia kneeling beside Lily at the piano, her hand guiding the child's fingers across the keys. A moment of tenderness had been twisted into an accusation. Adrian stared at the images, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the desk. The captions below each photograph were worse than the pictures themselves. Insinuations of impropriety, suggestions that Sofia had wormed her way into the household for personal gain, whispers of manipulation cloaked as care. He tossed the papers aside, but their words clung to him like ash. The phone rang. His assistant's voice trembled as she patched through the first of many calls. "Adrian, it's worse than you think," one partner said, voice tight. "Our investors are uneasy. They're asking why you're endangering your name, our name, with a maid in the spotlight." Another call followed. "We can't afford scandal right now. You must contain this, Adrian. Reassign her. Let her go quietly. You know what the board will demand." The calls blurred into a single chorus: "Protect the empire." Adrian closed his eyes, listening, but his mind drifted back to the conservatory. He remembered Lily's laughter as Sofia coaxed her into a melody, the spark of joy that had returned to a child who had once lived in silence. The memory burned sharper than any headline. Still, he said little. The silence he had once mastered as a weapon became, in that moment, his weakness. Sofia, meanwhile, discovered the rumors not in print but in whispers. When she entered the kitchen, the staff hushed mid-sentence. Eyes darted toward her, pitying and skeptical all at once. She tried to ignore it until one of the younger maids slipped a phone into her hand. "I thought you should see," she whispered. Sofia stared at the glowing screen. Her stomach turned cold. Her name, printed across gossip blogs, threaded into accusations she had never invited. Her throat tightened as she scrolled through comments, each one a dagger. She set the phone down and drew a breath, but her hands trembled. By the time Adrian found her that afternoon, she was packing a small suitcase in her room. "You're leaving?" His voice cracked despite his attempt to keep it steady. Her hands froze over a folded blouse. "What choice do I have? The whole city thinks I'm here to climb into your world. They've taken everything pure, my care for Lily, her laughter, and turned it into poison." Adrian stepped forward. "I'll fix it." "You can't," Sofia said softly but firmly. "You can silence reporters, you can buy papers, but you can't erase what people believe. And Lily will be the one who suffers. I won't let her become a weapon against you, or against me." From the doorway came a soft, broken cry. Don't go. Both turned. Lily stood there, clutching her doll, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. She ran forward and threw her arms around Sofia's waist. "Don't leave me too," she sobbed, voice muffled against Sofia's dress. Sofia sank to her knees, hugging her tightly. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered, "Little one, I don't want to leave, but sometimes love means knowing when to step away before it hurts more." Adrian's chest tightened. He wanted to shout, to demand that Sofia stay, to defy the world and its opinions, but the weight of his empire pressed down like iron chains. The phone calls, the warnings, the threats of financial collapse, they all coiled around his throat. His silence stretched once again, heavy and suffocating. Lily's sobs filled the room. Sofia kissed her hair, whispering promises she didn't know if she could keep. Adrian watched, his heart breaking, his hands trembling, yet still, he said nothing that could bridge the chasm. By nightfall, the bags were ready. Sofia placed a folded envelope on Adrian's desk. "My notice," she said quietly. "It's better this way." He stood there, rigid, his jaw set, every instinct inside him screaming to stop her. But the words that mattered most, "Stay, I need you, she needs you," remained trapped, swallowed by fear of scandal and shame. Sofia turned away. Her footsteps echoed down the marble hall, Lily's muffled sobs trailing after her. And then the great doors closed, leaving Adrian alone in a silence deeper and darker than he had ever known. The mansion, once filled with tentative notes of piano music and Lily's hesitant laughter, fell into a hush so profound it rang in Adrian's ears. Every room he entered carried the echo of absence. An empty chair at the breakfast table, a muted conservatory, a hallway where Lily once skipped beside Sofia. Lily spoke less. At dinner, she picked at her food in silence. At night, Adrian heard her crying into her pillow. He tried to comfort her, awkwardly, clumsily, but when he reached for her hand, she whispered, "I want..." He didn't know how to answer. His silence only deepened the wound. Business became unbearable. At meetings, words blurred. He saw Sofia's face in every headline, heard Lily's sobs in every pause. The empire he had built, once his anchor, now felt like a fortress of glass, brittle and empty. One evening, desperate, Adrian wandered into the conservatory. The piano sat open, its keys white and waiting. He placed his hands on them, but no sound came. He wasn't Sofia. He wasn't the warmth Lily longed for. He was the man who had let that warmth slip away. Outside, the world continued its cruel rhythm. Tabloids speculated about Sofia's disappearance. Rumors swirled of hush money, of secrets hidden within the Blackwood mansion. Each new story tightened the noose around Adrian's chest. And yet, none of it hurt as much as the look in Lily's eyes. She had once looked at him with hope, fragile but growing. Now, her gaze carried disappointment, sorrow, and a question she didn't dare ask aloud. "Why didn't you fight for her?" One night, unable to bear it, Adrian returned to Sofia's room. He opened the door quietly, half expecting her to be there, but the bed was neatly made, the dresser bare, the air devoid of her presence. On the nightstand, however, remained a small scrap of paper. It was a child's drawing, colored in uneven strokes. Lily's work. 3 figures stood hand in hand. A tall man, a woman with dark hair, and a little girl with a yellow dress. Above them, Lily had written one word in shaky letters: family. Adrian's chest constricted. He sank onto the bed, the paper trembling in his hands. His daughter had seen them as family before he had dared admit it himself, and he had shattered that possibility with silence. For the first time in years, Adrian Blackwood wept. The controlled, silent grief he had carried since his wife's death, but raw, breaking sobs that filled the empty room. He pressed the drawing to his chest as if it could stitch the pieces of his heart together. Down the hall, Lily lay awake, her small face buried against her pillow. The house groaned with the sound of her father's grief, a sound she didn't understand but somehow knew was too late. The mansion was silent again, but it was no longer the silence of grief alone. It was the silence of love unspoken, of words left unsaid, of a breaking point reached and crossed. For Adrian, the cost of his hesitation had never been clearer. He had chosen reputation over love, and in doing so, he had lost the only light left in his daughter's world. The mansion had fallen into the kind of silence that presses down on every breath. The staff moved quietly, Lily no longer filled the halls with laughter, and Adrian carried himself like a man with lead strapped to his shoulders. Days blurred together, each one heavier than the last. He buried himself in work, but the empire that had once fueled him now only reminded him of what he had lost. Then, one morning, everything changed. Adrian was in his study, staring blankly at documents, when his phone buzzed relentlessly. At first, he ignored it, another business crisis no doubt, but when his assistant burst in, pale and wide-eyed, he knew it was something else entirely. "Sir," she whispered, placing a tablet in front of him. "You need to see this." The screen lit up with a video, shaky but clear enough. It had been filmed weeks earlier during the charity dinner, secretly by a guest. The footage showed Sofia seated at the piano beside Lily. The little girl's hands trembled over the keys, her lips pressed in nervous concentration. Sofia leaned in, her voice a soft murmur. "You can do this, Lily. One note at a time. I'm right here." The child pressed the first note, faltering, then another. The melody was broken, hesitant, but Sofia's hand rested gently on Lily's shoulder, steadying her. With each note, her encouragement whispered like a lifeline. "Beautiful, keep going. You're not alone." By the middle of the piece, Lily was playing with both hands, her voice small, shaky, but real, leaves, singing the lyrics softly under her breath. When the final chord echoed through the room, the child's smile bloomed, radiant and unguarded, brighter than the chandeliers above. The video cut to Sofia clapping gently, whispering, "See, you had it in you all along." Adrian's chest tightened, the room around him faded. All he could see was his daughter's smile, a smile that had seemed impossible since his wife's death. The internet had already claimed the video. On social media, it exploded overnight. Hashtags trended worldwide. #millions shared the clip, praising the quiet strength of the woman who had been cast aside. Comments poured in by the thousands. "She gave that child her voice back. This isn't scandal. This is love. Adrian Blackwood owes her everything." For the first time, the gossip columns didn't mock. They celebrated. Sofia wasn't painted as a gold digger anymore, but as a hero, a woman who had lit a candle in the heart of a grieving child. Adrian watched the clip again, and again, each time his vision blurred with tears he could no longer hold back. He had seen Sofia with Lily 100 times, but never from the outside, never through the eyes of someone who could truly capture the transformation. He realized he hadn't simply lost a maid, he had lost the very source of his daughter's healing. Later that day, while scrolling, he stumbled upon a comment that pierced him deeper than the rest. Someone had written beneath the video, "She gave Lily what all his money could not. Hope." Adrian leaned back, his hands trembling. Hope. That was it. The very thing he had failed to give his daughter, the very thing he had withheld from himself since his wife's death. And Sofia had given it freely, without expectation, without anything in return. By evening, Adrian could no longer ignore what needed to be done. For years, he had let silence be his shield, but now, silence was his shame. The world had already judged him, and for once, it wasn't for his ruthless business tactics, but for his failure to be a father. He called his assistant. "Prepare a statement," he said, his voice thick but resolute. "No, not a statement, a press conference. Tomorrow?" The assistant blinked, startled. "Sir, the board won't approve." "This isn't about the board," Adrian cut in. "This is about my daughter and about Sofia Rivera." For the first time in years, the decision didn't come from strategy or calculation. It came from the heart of a man, stripped bare of excuses. The press conference drew a crowd that rivaled the unveiling of one of Adrian's biggest mergers. Reporters filled the hall, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Everyone expected denial, spin, or silence. That was how Adrian Blackwood had always operated: strategic, cold, untouchable. But when he stepped up to the podium, he looked different. His tie was loose, his posture less rigid, his eyes lined not with arrogance but exhaustion and sorrow. The murmurs quieted, the cameras clicked. He gripped the podium, took a steadying breath, and began. "You've all seen the video," he said, his voice echoed raw. "And you've seen my daughter smile." There was a pause, long enough for the words to sink in. He scanned the crowd, but in truth, his mind was fixed on only two faces, Lily's and Sofia's. "Smile," he continued, "wasn't mine to give. For years, I thought I could fix everything with money, with tutors, with doctors, but I couldn't. I was blind. It took someone else, someone I didn't value the way I should have, to show me what love looks like in action." The room was silent, the tension sharp enough to cut. Adrian's voice cracked as he went on. "Her name is Sofia Rivera. She was hired as a maid in my house, but in truth, she became more than that. She became the reason my daughter found her laughter again, and instead of standing by her, I let pride and fear drive her away." Gasps rippled through the room. Adrian gripped the podium tighter, forcing himself not to falter. Headlines called her a scandal, a distraction, but they were wrong. Sofia Rivera is not my shame. She is my daughter's miracle, and my greatest mistake was letting her walk out those doors. For a moment, Adrian stopped, pressing his hand against his mouth to steady his voice. When he looked up again, his eyes glistened. "Today, I'm not here as a businessman. I'm here as a father, and I need the world to know that I failed. I failed Sofia, I failed my daughter, and I failed the memory of my wife by letting silence win." Flashes burst from cameras. Reporters scribbled furiously. Adrian, once known for calculated control, now stood exposed, his confession laid bare for the world. "I don't care what the board thinks. I don't care what investors threaten. Sofia gave Lily what no empire could: hope, music, joy. And I would trade every contract, every dollar, every headline to have that back." When he stepped down from the podium, the room erupted. Some reporters shouted questions, others simply stared, stunned by the rawness of his words. The conference had not been the shield of a CEO, but the confession of a man stripped of his defenses. That night, the internet burned with the clip of his speech. Bring Freely trended higher, joined by a new one, Sofia Phobia. Public opinion, once cruel, now flooded with sympathy. People wrote messages praising his honesty, urging Sofia to return, celebrating the courage of a maid who had done what wealth could not. Adrian sat in his empty study, watching the footage on repeat. He wasn't sure if Sofia would ever forgive him, but for the first time, he had spoken the truth out loud. And as he glanced at Lily, asleep on the couch nearby, her doll tucked against her chest, he whispered softly, "I'll find her. I'll make this right." The silence of the mansion was no longer just silence. It was a pause before the fight he knew he had to make. The fight not for reputation or empire, but for the woman who had given his daughter her voice, and for the chance at love he had nearly destroyed. The rain came down in sheets, soaking the streets of the city in silver. Adrian had never cared about storms before. He used to view them as inconveniences, delays for flights, or interruptions to power at the mansion. But tonight, the storm felt personal, like the sky itself was punishing him for his silence. For every moment he let pride choke the words that should have been spoken to Sofia Rivera. He stood outside a modest apartment building on the edge of town, clutching the railing as though it could steady the turmoil inside him. The glow from the hallway light flickered weakly through the curtains of the second floor, and he knew she was there. After weeks of hiding behind money and statements, he had finally tracked her down, not as the millionaire employer, not as the man desperate to preserve reputation, but as a father who had failed and a man who had realized too late what truly mattered. His chauffeur had begged him to wait out the storm, but Adrian had refused. Some things couldn't wait. Not anymore. With his heart pounding, he climbed the stairs 2 at a time and knocked. The sound was heavy, uneven, almost drowned by the thunder above. At first there was no answer. Then, slowly, the door creaked open. Sofia stood in the frame, her hair pulled into a loose bun, her face pale but resolute. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, but to Adrian, she looked more regal than any heiress he had ever known. "Shouldn't be here," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. The sleepless nights, the whispers, the humiliations she had endured since leaving the mansion. Behind her, Adrian glimpsed Lily's doll resting on the sofa, left behind after another day of tears. The sight nearly undid him. He swallowed hard, rain dripping from his coat, and whispered, "I had to come." Sofia's brow furrowed. "Why? To tell me the board finally approved your confession? To buy me back with more apologies and promises you won't keep?" Her words cut, but he didn't flinch. He deserved worse. He said firmly, stepping forward until the rain spilled inside around them. "I'm not here as your employer. I'm not here as a man with wealth or power. I'm here because I can't keep breathing in a house without you in it. Because you didn't just save Lily, you saved me." The words came raw, unpolished, torn from a place inside him that had long been locked away. Sofia froze, her lips parting slightly. She had braced herself for excuses, for half-truths, for charm wrapped in arrogance. But this sounded like a man stripped of armor. She shook her head, retreating a step. "You don't mean that. You're overwhelmed. This is guilt speaking, not love. You'll wake tomorrow, go back to your empire, and I'll be nothing more than a memory of weakness." Adrian's chest tightened. "Is that what you really believe? That you're weakness? Sofia, you are the only strength I've had since Claire died. You're the only reason Lily laughs again, and His voice cracked, his knees nearly giving way. "I can't lose you two." The storm outside seemed to pause, the thunder rumbling low as though listening. Before Sofia could respond, a small voice broke through the air. "Daddy?" Adrian turned sharply. At the end of the hallway stood Lily, barefoot in her pajamas, her curls damp from the humidity. She clutched Sofia's hand with fierce determination, her wide eyes filled with both fear and hope. "Please don't go," Lily whispered to Sofia, her tiny voice trembling but strong enough to pierce through the storm. Adrian's heart shattered. He saw it then, the way his daughter held Sofia's hand as though it were the last tether keeping her world together. He remembered the countless nights Lily had cried alone, the silence that had replaced her voice, the hollow halls of the mansion that no amount of fortune could fill. And he understood with painful clarity, this wasn't just about him. This was about the family he had been too blind to see forming right in front of him. He dropped to his knees, uncaring of the rain soaking his suit, his palms pressing against the wooden floor of the hallway. His voice cracked as he looked up at Sofia, his face wet not only from the storm, but from the tears he could no longer hold back. "Please," he begged. "I don't want you to stay as a maid. I don't want you to stay because of duty or pity. I want you because this family, our family, only exists if you're in it. Give me another chance. Not as a master and maid, not as a man and an employee, but as Adrian and Sofia. As a father and a woman who gave my daughter her smile back. Let us build something together, not out of wealth, but out of love." Sofia's lips trembled, her chest rising and falling as though every breath was a battle. "Adrian," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "You don't understand what you're asking. If I say yes, I risk everything again. My dignity, my heart, my place in a world that already despises me. You let me walk away once. What happens when the world pushes back again?" Adrian crawled forward, rain pooling around him, his voice desperate but clear. "Then I will stand in front of you. I will take every blow, every headline, every whisper. I will not falter again. Because I've already lost you once, Sofia, and I won't survive losing you twice." The hallway was silent, except for the storm. Lily tightened her grip on Sofia's hand, her small face tilted upward with a look that mirrored Adrian's plea. "Please, Isa," the child whispered again. "I want him. I want you. I want us." Sofia looked between them. The broken man on his knees, stripped of everything but truth, and the little girl who had stitched herself into her heart as though she had been hers all along. The dam inside her cracked. Her tears spilled freely as she whispered, "I'm so tired of running." And when Adrian reached for her hand, trembling but steady, she didn't pull away. The moment their hands touched, the storm outside seemed to soften, as though even the heavens had been waiting for her answer. Adrian's grip was gentle, reverent, as though afraid she would vanish if he held too tightly. "Sofia," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion, "I can't promise perfection, I can't promise I'll never stumble, but I can promise you this. I will never again let pride silence me. I will fight for you, for Lily, for us, with every breath I have left." Sofia's tears mingled with the rain that clung to her face. She searched his eyes, looking for the lies she had once expected, the arrogance she had braced herself against. But there was none. Only humility, only truth. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Why now, Adrian? Why after everything? Why after letting me walk out into humiliation, letting me carry the weight of whispers alone?" His throat tightened. "Because I was a coward. I thought silence could protect you. I thought distance could shield Lily. But I was wrong. My silence destroyed us, and your courage, the courage you showed every time you knelt beside my daughter, every time you reminded her she wasn't broken. That's the courage I need to learn. I don't want to save you, Sofia. I want to be saved by the way you love." The confession spilled out of him like a flood, unguarded and desperate. His knees ached from the wooden floor, but he didn't move. He wanted her to see that this wasn't performance. This was surrender. For a long moment, Sofia said nothing. Her chest rose and fell with deep, uneven breaths. Then, she crouched down, her hand brushing across Lily's curls before meeting Adrian's trembling hands. "You break me, Adrian," she whispered, her voice both fragile and fierce. "You tear me apart and then ask me to believe you'll hold me together. Do you know how terrifying that is?" He bowed his head, pressing her hand against his forehead as though in prayer. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving you don't have to be afraid of me anymore." The words hung between them, heavy and healing all at once. Lily, sensing the shift, pressed Sofia's hand into Adrian's. Her small voice, soft but sure, broke through the storm. "Family," she whispered. The single word cut through Adrian like lightning. He lifted his head, his eyes burning with tears, and looked at Sofia. "She's right. We're already a family. We've been one from the moment you made her laugh again. Please, Sofia, don't walk away. Stay and let us love you." Sofia's defenses crumbled. With a sob, she collapsed into his arms, her forehead pressing against his shoulder as the rain poured through the open doorway. Adrian wrapped her close, one hand tangled in her hair, the other holding her, as though he could shield her from every cruel whisper the world had thrown. Tears streamed down both their faces, mixing with the storm, their breaths ragged but united. Lily threw her small arms around them both, her doll squished between them, her voice muffled but radiant. "Don't leave me too." Adrian kissed the top of his daughter's head, his arms tightening around them both. "Never," he vowed, his voice trembling. "Never again." They stayed there for what felt like forever, three broken souls finding refuge in one another. The rain softened to a drizzle, the thunder fading into the distance, as though the storm had done its work and could finally rest. When Sofia finally pulled back, her cheeks were streaked with tears, but her eyes held something different now. Hope. "Aloud," she whispered, her voice shaking but steady enough to change the world. "I'll stay, but not as your maid, Adrian, as myself, as a woman who deserves to be seen, who deserves to be loved." Adrian cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing over her damp skin, his gaze unwavering. "Not just loved, cherished, every day for the rest of my life." She let out a shaky laugh, half a sob, half relief, and leaned into his touch. "Then, don't you dare fail me again." "Why?" he promised, his voice breaking with conviction. "I swear it." Behind them, Lily's smile returned, brighter than the sun finally breaking through the storm clouds outside. For the first time in years, the Blackwood mansion would not be defined by silence, but by music, by laughter, by love. And as Adrian held Sofia and Lily in his arms, he realized that the confession he had feared making was not his downfall, but his redemption. For in confessing his love, he had not lost his pride, he had found his. A year had passed, yet the Blackwood mansion no longer resembled the cold, echoing palace that Adrian once returned to night after night. The same marble floors gleamed, the chandeliers still shimmered, and the grand halls stretched endlessly, but everything about the house had changed. Laughter filled its corners, music spilled from its rooms, and the ghosts that once haunted its walls had finally been laid to rest. Adrian stood at the threshold of the music room, watching the scene before him with quiet awe. Sofia sat at the piano bench, her posture relaxed, her fingers guiding Lily's small hands over the keys. The little girl's laughter rang out like bells, warm and unstrained, echoing off the walls with a joy that had been absent for too long. "Good," Sofia encouraged softly, her voice steady and loving. "Let the notes flow, don't force them." Lily pressed the keys again, stumbling at first, then finding the rhythm. The melody wasn't perfect, but the light in her eyes was, and that was all that mattered. Adrian's throat tightened. There had been a time, not long ago, when he feared Lily's voice had been silenced forever, buried beneath grief and pain. But now, here she was, her laughter mingling with the music, her spirit alive again. He leaned against the doorframe, his gaze drawn to Sofia. She hadn't just restored Lily's laughter. She had restored his home, his heart, his life. He still remembered the night he knelt in the rain outside her apartment, begging for forgiveness. That night had marked the beginning of everything new. Now, she was not the maid in whispered scandal. She was his wife, his partner, and the woman who had taught him what strength truly looked like. Sofia looked up then, catching his gaze. Her lips curved into a smile that held the weight of everything they had endured and everything they had built. Adrian crossed the room, pressing a kiss to her temple, as Lily beamed at them both. "Are you ready for tonight?" Hermia asked, her voice tinged with both nerves and excitement. Adrian nodded. "The Foundation's first gala. It's bigger than any deal I've ever signed." Sofia laughed softly, shaking her head. "That's because it's not about deals. It's about hearts." The Blackwood Foundation for Children in Grief had been their shared dream, born from Lily's pain and Sofia's vision. Together, they had built it into something real, funding music therapy programs, offering scholarships, and creating safe spaces for children who had lost more than they could bear. And tonight, they would unveil it to the world. Hours later, the mansion's ballroom was transformed. Golden lights draped from the ceiling, long tables adorned with white roses and candles. Guests in evening gowns and tuxedos filled the space, but unlike the stiff corporate galas Adrian used to host, this one carried a different energy. There was laughter, warmth, and a quiet reverence. Adrian moved through the crowd with Sofia by his side, their hands linked as though they couldn't risk letting go. He greeted business leaders, philanthropists, and artists, but his heart remained anchored to her presence. Every time she spoke of the foundation, her eyes shone with conviction, her words filled with the kind of passion no wealth could fabricate. "This isn't just about healing children," Sofia explained to a donor. "It's about giving them tools to express what words can't. Music carries what silence cannot bear." Adrian listened, pride swelling in his chest. She spoke like someone who had lived it, because she had. Her own childhood losses, her battles with grief, her resilience had shaped her into the woman who now stood before the elite, unapologetically fierce in her compassion. Then, the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the evening's program. Guests found their seats as Adrian stepped onto the stage. He looked out at the sea of faces, the weight of the moment pressing down, and for once, he wasn't nervous about his reputation. He wasn't here as the millionaire tycoon. He was here as a father, as a husband, as a man who had been humbled and rebuilt by love. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "A year ago, this mansion was silent. My daughter, Lily, had lost her voice to grief. I thought money could fix what was broken. I was wrong. It wasn't wealth that healed her. It was music, and it was love. And it was Sofia." The crowd turned to Sofia, who sat in the front row, her cheeks flushed, her eyes glistening. "This foundation exists because a little girl reminded me that no child should ever suffer in silence," Adrian continued. "Tonight, you'll hear from her, not just in words, but in music." The room fell silent as Lily walked onto the stage, her small hands trembling slightly. She sat at the piano, Sofia standing close behind her, offering a reassuring nod. And then, Lily began to play. The melody was simple, tentative at first, but each note carried weight beyond its sound. It was the song Sofia had taught her, a piece born of love and resilience. The room listened in awe, not just because a child was performing, but because of the story behind every key she struck. When the final note lingered in the air, Lily turned to the microphone set beside the piano. Her voice, soft but clear, carried through the hall. "Mommy gave me love," she said, her eyes shining with innocence and strength. "Miss Sofia gave me back my voice." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tears flowed freely, handkerchiefs lifted, hearts stirred. Adrian stood at the edge of the stage, unable to move, his chest so full he thought it might break. He looked at Sofia, and in that moment, he flicked, whispered with reverence, "This is the legacy that matters." The applause rose like thunder, but none of it mattered to Adrian as much as the sight before him. His daughter smiling, Sofia's hand steady on her shoulder, the glow of hope illuminating them both. After Lily's performance, the gala continued with speeches and pledges, but the atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer just an elegant evening, it was a testament to resilience. Donors came forward with generosity, inspired not by Adrian's wealth, but by Sofia's vision and Lily's courage. Adrian remained close to his family, the three of them a beacon in the crowd. He saw the way guests gravitated to Sofia, not because of her title or her role, but because of the authenticity she carried. She was no longer whispered about as the maid. She was celebrated as the founder, the heart behind the mission. Later, as the guests enjoyed dinner and music, Adrian slipped away for a moment of quiet. He found himself at the balcony overlooking the gardens, the cool night air brushing against his skin. Sofia soon joined him, her gown shimmering softly in the moonlight. "You were brilliant," he said, his voice low, filled with awe. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "It wasn't me, it was Lily. She's the reason we're here." Adrian took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "No, Sofia, you're the reason she found her voice. You're the reason I found mine." Her eyes softened, and she leaned into him. "Then let's keep using it, not for power, not for pride, but for them. For children who need to know they're not alone." He nodded, his chest swelling with a love so profound it anchored him to this moment. This woman, this life he never thought he'd deserve. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of joy and gratitude. Guests lingered long after the program ended, unwilling to leave the warmth of what had been created. By the time the last candle flickered low, the mansion no longer felt like a monument to wealth. It felt like a home, alive and purposeful. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep clutching her doll, Adrian and Sofia walked hand in hand through the now quiet ballroom. The echoes of laughter and music still lingered in the air. "She did it," Sofia whispered, glancing at the piano. "She showed them all what true courage looks like." Adrian tightened his arm around her. "She's her mother's daughter," he said softly, then looked into Sofia's eyes. "And she's yours too now." Sofia's lips curved into a trembling smile. "I never imagined I'd belong here. But tonight, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like family." Adrian kissed her then, slow and reverent, sealing the truth neither of them needed to speak aloud. They had built something greater than wealth, greater than legacy. They had built a life defined by love. The following weeks proved the foundation's success. Programs launched across the city, providing instruments, lessons, and therapy for children grappling with grief. Adrian watched as Sofia thrived in her role, speaking at schools, meeting families, and designing programs that reached beyond music into the hearts of those most in need. He often stood back during those moments, letting her shine, because he understood now this was her gift. His empire had been built on deals and numbers, but this legacy, their legacy, was built on healing. One afternoon, as the foundation's office buzzed with activity, Lily ran in, clutching a piece of paper. "Daddy, look!" she exclaimed, her voice bright. Adrian knelt, taking the paper. It was a drawing of their family, him, Sofia, and Lily, standing in front of a piano with the words scrawled above, "We are music now." His throat closed with emotion. He lifted Lily into his arms, pressing his cheek to her curls. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered. The final scene came months later at another foundation event. Children gathered around the piano, their voices blending in a chorus of healing. Lily sat proudly at the keys, her fingers moving with confidence, her head held high. As the music swelled, she looked at the crowd and said with the honesty of a child who had once been silent, "My mommy gave me love. Miss Sophia gave me back my voice." The room erupted in applause, but Adrian didn't hear it. He only heard the beating of his heart, the sound of a legacy fulfilled. He leaned toward Sofia, his voice breaking as he whispered, "This is the legacy that matters." In her eyes he saw his future, not in empires or fortunes, but in a family, in music, and in love rebuilt from grief.